Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Business Central Essentials webinar. We'll be providing CPE credits, and we will have polling and quiz questions that will be shown throughout. Steve Anderson is our solution architect, and he will be going through an overview of General Ledger with Business Centrals. And please feel free at any time to utilize the open chat here for any Q&A, which we will happily be reviewing and helping to address throughout the webinar. Today for the program for the CPE credits and as an overview of General Ledger, we will have specialized knowledge with field of study, and this is an intermediate program level. We'll be issuing the CPE credits with the count of 1 credit, and this will be an hour program length dedicated with 50 minutes on content with General Ledger within Business Central. This meeting will be recorded, and if there are any issues or questions, as we mentioned, please feel free to use the chat feature, and we will be following with the certification for the CPE credit after the webinar to all of those who attended and participated in the polls and quizzes. We do have monitoring mechanisms through which each of the polls and quizzes taken will identify the correct answers, and there's at least 70% to earn the CPE credit that will have to be made on the responses. And the attendees will need to have the cameras on, which will be monitored by the co-host. Again, the 50 minutes attendance during the webinar program content will also be monitored, and this is the criteria to follow if you are looking for the CPE accreditation. As the screen says, let's dive in.
All right.
I'll hand it over to Steve Anderson.
Thank you, Sam. I'll take it from here. So, yeah, we're going to go through the basics of GL. I know it says intermediate. There'll be some intermediate topics. There's a lot to cover. So some of this will just be kind of introductory, and some of it I'll show. We'll be doing a combo here of PowerPoint and Business Central Live. We'll use the PowerPoint to just kind of guide us through things. Just to put this in a point of reference, a little bit of crude diagram I did here, but just to keep everybody kind of knows this from using accounting systems, but GL is usually the focal point of what, all your other modules are feeding the GL. So GL is critical, and then your output over there on the right, that you get your financial reporting, your analysis, things happening from the GL. So BC, like a lot of systems, all the other modules integrate, so it's all critical that things come in. Today, what we're going to focus on is more like what you would do in the GL. So I think of it more like what the staff accountants might do from a point of view of, booking entries, closing and things. And we'll do some analysis of looking at data that came from other modules. But really, GL is kind of the focal point, and we're gonna say pretend like we're doing like kind of staff accountant or month-end close type of work is what we're going to get through. But we'll do a little bit first, like what's the foundation, and from the BC point of view, how do we manage our accounts? What are dimensions? What do we find things that are used? And there's some different options here about like allocation and stat accounts. We won't go too deep into that, but there's some interesting capabilities there. So this is the chart of accounts list. This is the point where I'm going to switch over to BC, and we'll kind of switch back and forth. So just kind of talking through what accounts do and what dimensions do and things. So this is the interface for BC. I know some of y'all use BC, and this might be new to some people, but I'm going to go to that chart of accounts list and just talk about a couple of important things when you're managing your chart. Of course, there's always strict rules on how we add accounts, and for your company, you've got a structure that you need to follow, and where accounts go, and who's supposed to be able to do that. But there's some really important points here as far as being able to manage these later and also have some control in place. There's some key fields, for example, like, is this balance sheet or income statement? What's the category? The categories can be real important depending on how you're doing your reporting later. So in your particular company, if you're doing that, those categories could be out of the box, or they could be that you've tailored them to what you need to do. That's going to help drive reporting and analysis and things. So just important to remember how those happen. So that's just more how things get organized. But a couple of other pieces, though, there's some, probably the most important one on here, at least in my point of view, is for your control accounts, whether you allow direct posting or not. And this direct posting means, can I go in and do a journal entry, or can I go in and do an entry directly to that account? Like, you really shouldn't do entries to cash, to inventory, to AP trade, AR trade, those type of accounts. So this is a way to, now I have it turned on because in my demo environment, I like to just touch everything. But best practice would say these are turned off for those control accounts, right? So you got some best practice type views there. You also might have other scenarios where you're blocking the use of accounts. That can be important. So there are some controls here, but the main point here is that, managing what makes sense when you do have to add accounts, that they're in the right categories, they're following the right structure, and you've got a logical way that you've listed those out in this particular view. It's recommended also that you see here that we have what we would consider like account roll-ups, that it can be used, and there's different ways to do these. But I've got like AR's got a grouping, of course, of the other accounts, and you don't ever use these accounts, but it's a convenient way to see these, and you can drill down on those too. So that's a common way to do it. Now, as far as the way BC handles the charts concerned, we use the natural account. So that's why you just see this one account. You don't see on here things like, well, where's my department, or where's my line of business, or where's my company code, or where are those things? That gets us over into the concept of the dimensions. So let me switch. I'm going to just do a search on this one. Actually, I have this on my homepage. We'll go to my dimensions. So when you're navigating through here, I'll just make a couple of notes about things like this. Hopefully you have the shortcuts for the things that you like to use frequently, and those are easy to set up. But this, in my demo, I have a lot, but in our discussion, we're really going to focus on, I've got a department and a company. That's very common. You might have other things that you're doing, but when you're thinking about the chart, you've got your natural account that says, expenses and in the balance sheet where things go. But then you want to say, well, I want a little more segmented. So if I look at, for example, a department list, I'm going to go up to the values here. This just says, what are the department numbers? So that's a very traditional way to do that. So it could be coding things to different departments, different cost centers, different lines of business, different revenue lines, whatever it is that makes sense for you, you define that. I hope you never have a list like this. That would be really crazy for a day-to-day company. I have a lot in my demo, but we commonly see 2, 3, sometimes 4. You don't want to get too far into that. And their main reason to have them is, of course, research, filtering, and then ultimately your reports, right? So it's a big driver of that. Okay. Let me make sure I stay on track here. We hit a couple of those. Yeah, we talked about the dimensions. All right. I'm going to skip that one. That's not that important. One thing that is kind of important to know, and this kind of gets into the other modules, but there is if you're ever wondering, like, okay, the way BC uses their GL accounts, especially on the income statement, is you don't, you often, like for items and things, you don't post directly to the GL account. So you might wonder, like, where are things at, and how do I know in my mapping and my setup where things go? And so there is, I'm going to scroll down to one of the items, one of this revenue accounts here. I think this one may have something set up. There is a where used list. There we go. This basically tells you, like, okay, where is this GL account being used in my posting setup? So this could be important later, just to know, like, if you need to change things or how the posting is set up, and that's a whole different conversation about how the posting groups work in BC. But it can be important to know, like, before you start deciding, I don't want to use this account anymore, or how is it being used to know where in the system. So this is just a guide to kind of tell you in your posting setup where it would go, and you can drill into that and understand it. So there's some foundational things that'll help you know where those accounts are being used. Okay, let's talk about allocation accounts, and then we'll get to the stat accounts. The allocation accounts, I got a couple of different examples, but and there's different ways to use these. One of the ways to use them is you can book an entry to one account and it can spread to others. And so there's different methods for doing that, whether it's like a fixed amount, like on this one, I'm doing 25% of a spread to different, like I'm allocating interest expense. It can be spread that way. Or you can do a variable, which means it's based on some other metric, some other account, or some other measure. It's just a way to save a little time. And even though on mine, you can see it shows that those are all the same account number. What I really have done behind the scenes is, and I'll get to let me pull up the allocation account here, the one I did for interest there. I did one also for salaries, but for the interest view, it looks the same, but it's really not the same because I have the dimensions on here. So this is going to department 100, the bottom one's going to department 400, right? So this would be a way to say, in certain scenarios of an entry, hey, book to this account, it automatically spreads it to the 4 in some predetermined way. So this is just meant to be a time saver method to do it. The other one I have, like with the payroll, the same kind of thing. I took the salaries account, sorry there, and the same thing. These are all just, you can't see it, but these are all different dimensions. So saying spread the salary when I do my payroll entry to a bunch of different accounts. And I'll show you what that looks like. So that's one option just to keep in mind. You might have a use case for doing allocation accounts. Oh, and here comes there's a poll that just came up. If you can answer that, and I'm going to answer it, and go ahead. Submit that. Okay, should got a poll. We'll talk about the statistical accounts. Again, this is kind of a special use case. And this is a newer feature, not that new, but a somewhat newer feature in BC. In this example, we want to track head count by these codes that are getting us some diversity reporting. And so you could come up with lots of different ways to do this, right? It could be head count, it could be square footage, it could be metrics and volume. Usually the purpose of this is for some other type of reporting and sometimes for ratio calculations and things. But it's just a way to do that. It's got its own way of tracking those, and it's got its own way of doing journals. It doesn't go through a normal journal. So when we get to normal journals, we won't go through this, but that's just good to know that this can help you for your reporting if you've got a place to store this instead of having to link something to Excel. All right, so let's get into the processing side. So we're going to go through some different scenarios on the journals. We spend quite a bit of time just doing journals here. So let me just start with kind of the general journal. We'll be able to get our different scenarios kind of all together. So this is a list of journals that some people think of these like batches, or they're more like templates really, but there's different ways depending on what system you're used to. If you're new to BC, you might think of these differently, but I like to think of these as like a batch or a template that you can use. So see, I've got different ones that are defined for different use cases. I'm going to pull up the one for payroll just because this kind of helps give us a combo of topics to discuss. So this is what the unposted, so that's important to know. This is unposted journal entry that I have set up here. Different ways to do this one. This one's a lot, normally when we do our payroll entries, they're pretty long usually, right? Most of us have an external outsourced payroll system, and we're having to bring that data in. Sometimes we do imports, sometimes we copy paste, sometimes we have standard entries. So I want to talk about some of those scenarios here that you could do. But just first, kind of just looking at what's on this page, as you can see the dates, of course, a journal number that's going to get produced, the account number. When you're looking at these up, of course, you can either key in the number, or if I go out and I do a search, you'll be able to see that I can see these by name and things. That company code and the department code. So I'll mention those are going to be the important ones for our reporting. I have on these, most of these I have like company 999, then I have the departments. And you see I went through and I listed these because usually when we're doing payroll, we're kind of hitting the same payroll accounts on a lot of different departments. So usually it gets to be a really long entry. But doing that, see, we can tell, like for example, at the bottom, this tells us whether we're in balance or not. This number needs to be 0. So if I went, for example, to try and post this thing right now, I'm going to preview, post it. It's telling me that it's telling me that I have an error, that I have to have an amount. So I got a line without an amount. But also there's a little indicator over here on the right that tells us the same message. Not only should I have an amount, but also I'm out of balance, right? So I'm $1 million out of balance. So that's a good thing to kind of, a lot of people like to have this open, kind of see, are there any problems kind of live with what you're doing on your entry? So I'm going to fill this in first to put in basically the credit to cash or the net, that if you're doing on an entry. I'm going to put this in, and this is something I think that's kind of unique to BC. I haven't seen in other systems. I can put this number in and put minus after the fact. Kind of odd to me, not like you would do in Excel, but that gets the number in there, right? And so that tells me that's my credit. I'm in balance. I won't get any error messages. While we're here, let's talk about a couple other things on entries. We already mentioned the allocation. You can see on this one row, I'm using an allocation account instead of the normal account. It's kind of an offset, and I'm just have a note here that says I'm allocated by department. So this one is just exactly what we talked about a minute ago, right? I have this same GL account, but I'm spreading it by departments. So what that's going to do when I go do the preview is just getting kind of a use case scenario is you're going to see, we're going to preview it. It's a clean preview. We're going to look at the entries. You can see here, if I go up to the top, on my, it's my account of the 71, where's my salary? Let's see here. Whoops. This didn't sort the way I had it sorted earlier. There, let's see, salary. That's my 71,100. I could search for that too, which I really should do. Salaries. Okay, here we can see. So I had one line for the salaries. It split it automatically for me. So just an example of what it can do, right? It's a split. Just so you know, I should show that too here. On any of the screens, you can go in and do filtering. So fast way for me would have been to go in and filter on that. We'll see that more when we go into the kind of the ledger entries and analysis. But what I want to point out here is that's a big entry. We've got an allocation. As far as how we could get an entry like this created, or any entry really created, it's fairly common on something like a big payroll entry or a big accrual or something you're doing every month, that you might have a standard entry. So you can save as standard journals. You can have this saved, and when you save it, you can either have it, this one should be already out there. You can save this standard entry. You can save it with or without the amount. So like payroll, the amounts, salaries don't change, but their taxes and other things could change. So you can save them as standard. That could be a time saver as far as you bring these in. Another method you might do is you can actually copy these rows. So you could go in, copy the row. I just highlight out all my rows here, and I could Control C. Let's just grab those. I already have this. Yeah, I already have the Excel set up so we can look at it. You can copy those over, and this is you can copy paste the rows between Excel. So if you have a template for your payroll or something that you're doing, you may come to those, have those brought in, just drop it into Excel, and then as long as your format, you can see I got my headers across here. As long as that format's right, I can just come back over here, and I can be it can be blank, or I can extend this entry. I can just Control V into the rows, everything populates in. So that's another way besides saving a standard journal. The other way that I like to show, because this can apply in a lot of areas, is the edit in Excel. So I'll just do this real quick. And this is kind of a neat thing. There's a plug-in between BC and Excel that sees your data. And if you need to make changes to your data, let's say that I've got the data and I want to copy over the actual amounts, I can just go and do that. Or sometimes it might be a standard template and then I'm updating the dates. So I won't make all the changes here, but once you do that, you make your changes, you hit publish, right? Pushes it back. The neat thing about this, or one of the neat things about this, is it does data validation. You can't put bad data in. I mean, you can put bad numbers in, but you can't put in something like, you can't create a GL account that doesn't exist. You can't use this tool to change existing data as far as posted data. So it's one of the other ways, kind of a fast way to get your journals in. Okay. Once you're all done, you just post this, and it posts it live into the company, right? All right. So we didn't hit the recurring. Let's talk about recurring and reversing scenarios. So recurring is a situation where, let's say you got accruals or something else you want to do. There's my recurring. So I have one here that I've set up that is basically just a simple accrual. And on this simple accrual, I'm doing an accrue and a reverse. And so there's some codes here. This code basically means do the entry, but reverse it next month, right? So I've basically got my accrual accounts. Again, the reason I have two here is you can see I've got two different departments, right? So I got two different departments on what I'm doing to code these out, and they're going to the accrual. If I go through and we'll preview this. I go through and create this or go post it every month. You can see here it's doing my accrual for January. It's reversing it February 1st. So some people like to reverse on the 1st. Sometimes you want to do end of month. There's different codes that'll allow that. But just know you can book those accruals, those recurring, and then you just come in each month and you just book those. You can always change the amounts if you need to, etc. But the goal is saving some time going back and forth. I'm not doing it here, but that same concept applies with the allocations. There's ways you can do allocations with these two. And the same thing applies with copying the rows if you were to do that. These are meant to be more like they don't change, right? So, oh, I see a question there. We can address that. What was that question real quick?
The question that came in, I missed how you export the journal entry to Excel to work on it there and publish.
Sure. I know I'm going fast here. And we'll have the recording of this too. I'll just pick another entry here. Let's go on one of my monthly entries. Yeah, here's a shorter one. There's a little button that says edit in Excel. Now there's an open in Excel, just pushes the data over. Doesn't have the connector back to BC. The edit in Excel, you'll have to make sure the plugin. So if working with your partner, or we can help you, but that's what you need to do right there is to edit that. And it's important to know on this one, not everybody should have the ability to do that. So work with your team on who should have the ability to do that type of thing. Because I mean, it's a fast way to do things, but it's a fast way to get in trouble, right? So work with your team on who you think should have the ability to edit versus only pushing the data out. Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Sure. Thank you for the interruption. Let's see here. Let's go over. I'm going to just switch the view here real quick. I'm going to use this I primarily at the moment just want to talk about, let me clear that out. I'm going to do this for regular entries. What I want to point out is on reversals. You can go in and if you've got an entry you want to do, and let me go into let me open this one up. And the find entry on this. Okay, so there's a find entries. This helps you research where did things come from. But this is a screen where I can see the reverse. So if there are journals, you can tell the system, I want to reverse the journal. And there's different ways that you might have a scenario that you want to do this. But if you're just simply trying to do a correcting or reversing entry, you don't want to do it manually, that's a way to flip it around. Okay. I see there's another poll question that came through. So I'm going to answer that. And you should get a prompt. All right, so that's a simple way to do the reversals. I'm not going to go over this, but just so you know, because we've been talking about these dimension codes, if someone made a mistake on the coding, there is a way to correct those dimensions. Just something that you might want to follow up on or ask us about at some point. But there is a process for doing that where you can correct those dimensions if you don't want to go through and just do a big journal entry to fix them. Sometimes you want the journal entry, but this has a different methodology for doing it. Sometimes it's maybe more for mass corrections and not necessarily a one-off, but it's just something that is available when that scenario comes up. Okay, so let's move a little more through here. I think we've had all of these. Yeah, let's just get down. Okay, month-end processing. Let's talk about this a little bit. So we really, as you're going through these, of course, you're doing your processing. I mean, we really talked about this. I'm just trying to think of different things that, as an ex accountant myself, that you go through month end. You do a lot of entries. You're closing out your ledgers. Once you get to the point where your sub ledgers are kind of done, which usually happens first, then you start getting into, okay, what are the recurring entries that I got to do? Do I have to do accruals? I'm getting some analysis from another system. So go through all of that. We kind of talked about all those different scenarios. And look at reports and things. Once we're done with all of that, you may want to lock it down, right? Hopefully you will lock it down. So there's some best practice on scenarios where we should be locking down data and going through those. So I'm going to show you some of that. So I'm going to show you some different scenarios where we could lock down the data. Okay, so in my setup is one place. There's an overall kind of global system level that says, what am I allowed to make entries from and to? And best practices, you would have these filled in. It wouldn't be kind of open like mine is, but you can control overall who can do what, or what entries can be posted for dates with this right here. So that's one place where you would consider, let's do some closing on this. Now you might say, well, that's fine, but I need a few people to be able to keep posting for certain date ranges. Maybe the payables get shut down first, but then I need other people to be able to make postings. And so that is something you can control at the user level, which is, let's see if I have a shortcut for that. I don't have a shortcut for that one. So I'm going to search over here. You'll notice I'm doing a search a few times. So if I go to this one says user setup, I can see here, and I'll make a little bookmark, helps us get that on the page so I don't have to go search for it next time. So this view, this is not everybody in our system, but it's a few of us, right, that are saying, okay, this person, this is the date range that they can post. So this can vary by person. If they're not in here, it's controlled by that global setting. But if they're in here, they might have an override, or they might have a different restriction that they're working with. So you might have accounts payable has a certain date range that's more narrow, locked down quicker. Maybe the financial people, they need to keep it open. Maybe the controller needs to go further out into the future or further back into the past. Like you'll notice on this one of these, I had this person goes back to 26, and my system starts kind of in 26, 27. Like maybe they're still keeping the year end open because they're working on the audit or something, and they're going to do adjusting entries. But that's kind of a best practice to keep those in there granular so that you can say payables can do something, but then they're shut down. Everybody else can do what they need to do. So you can kind of control that way. There's a few other places to control these kind of things, but this is the primary way you think about closing the month per se, because there's not really there's not a hard close in BC for the GL. There is at year end, but there's not a hard close that you do for month end. Right, you just more about control and security that you do. Okay, so that's what that covers. Let's see, just going to hit first. Oh, yeah, this is not so much BC, but I wanted to help. We're always talking about Copilot, especially Microsoft, and we're all trying to get better at how in the heck can we use AI and Copilot and things. So I just have an example of something that I did that you can get creative and think about this. But and there's tools out there that will help you do your recons, right, between balance sheet accounts or maybe just GL to subledger. But also I just like to play around with Copilot. So I had just an example here to say, what if I was just like to take the GL data and compare it to the vendor data and see what doesn't match. So this will kind of gives a little bit of a segue into some analysis and inquiry, but I kind of think of this about like usually when I was doing this as an accountant, it'd be kind of a month-end process, right? You're like doing your recons to make sure everything's good. And I'll just show you on the screen here, and I'll show you the spreadsheet that it. So I basically went through and asked Copilot, hey, I want to compare these spreadsheets, and I'll show you where these came from. So I basically have the GL detail, which we haven't really gone to the GL screen yet, so we're gonna do that. General ledger entries. I like to use a different view. So this is kind of the native view, and it's got different filters and things you can do. I'm going to go into this native view onto June and see it first. The one that we like to use, which is a little newer version, is the analysis view. And what's neat about this is it feels like a pivot table. It kind of is a pivot table in the sense that you can kind of check off, turn on and off the different fields that you want to use. But you can also use this for grouping, so I can group by anything I want here. On this one, I just have a particular filter that I did. I've got certain type of documents and a certain date range, and so I built that in. You can see I have other tabs here where I've done other filters, or this one says by account. And so there's just different filters that you can use. And in our particular scenario we're talking about right now, I use this to say, hey, I'm going to reconcile June. So this is the GL side. So I've got all the GL activity that I think came from my payables module because it's under purchases. And there's different ways you do a filter, right? We've got different audit trail codes and things that help us know where did this stuff come from. And basically, I want to take this and I can run this out to Excel. So I can export this to Excel, which I did. So that was one side. I got the GL detail spit out to Excel. And then on the vendor side, same thing. There's I know we're not really going into the vendor processing today, but to get the vendor ledger, and I don't have a shortcut for that one right here. So I'll do my vendor ledger entries. Oh, I did have a shortcut. Same thing, right? Same kind of view, same kind of analysis, same ability to do, things like, group by document type, right? So I got some invoices, I got some payments. But what I did for our example was I went through, I put this together, I filtered it to June, and then I exported it to Excel. So I did all that just so I could say, hey, Copilot, I've got these two files loaded in, compare these for me and give me some kind of reconciliation. I didn't really tell it exactly what to do other than said, I just want to see what it would do just to get creative. So I did that, and I'll show you, it spit out, it was kind of neat. It took a few minutes, but it went through, it made some comparisons, created an Excel file, it created its own tabs, which is kind of neat, which I'll show you now. And it's not so much what it produced, just the idea of get creative and think about ways you can use this. It went through and it said, like one of these tabs says vendor detail for differences. Well, I purposely went into my data after I exported it out. It was already in balance in BC, but I went in and I broke it. So I went into my Excel and I broke it and I changed some amounts so it wouldn't balance. So it found two things that didn't balance, right? So you probably have your ways of doing this, but I'm trying to encourage everybody to get creative, think about ways Copilot can speed this thing up for you. And once you have it, you might like the layout, or you might want to tweak it a little bit. You can reuse it, right? So having done all that, I don't want to have to do all those steps again. I basically saved this in my Copilot conversation where I just asked it to update it. I popped in next month, I would pop in the next entries, the ledger entries from Excel, and I would let it run the process and it would just update this again. Now, there's much more sophisticated ways to do this, but this is like for those of us not necessarily using Copilot this way a lot yet, be thinking about that. It's a lot more than just ask some questions and get some help, right? It can start to do things for you. So I thought that was fun and interesting, and it kind of helps us use the GL data that we have out there. Okay, let's talk about the year-end close process. So this is pretty straightforward. We're not going to get into all the steps, but the closing process, there's a close income statement process. So there's some controls here, but the primary thing that we do, of course, when we close the year is we're taking the P&L and we're rolling it to the balance sheet. And so I just have some settings here that basically say, hey, I'm rolling this. Where am I rolling it? So I've got my cutoff date. I'm going to populate a certain batch, a certain journal, which I called it year-end close. It's got a number, and I'm saying what retained earnings in my account am I going to hit? That's something that you, of course, want to do. And you've got an option of, do you want to post this in summary or detail, balance or detail? I always like to go balance. I mean, I have seen in a few scenarios where the details come in, but that's really something you don't really want all your P&L details hitting the retained earnings, all that ledger, it's just extra data. But what you might want to do is if you had business unit codes right here, and you said, I want to do this by company, or I want to do this by department. I have seen some scenarios where they wanted divisional or departmental or company level inside the system breakdown of the retained earnings. The system will do that for you too, so you get some level of rolling those over. When you run this, it creates a journal. So it's not done when it does that. You run that process, you click OK, but it creates a journal, which I'll show you the one that I did. Actually, it's an unposted journal that I did earlier. So that's mine, that it says year-end close. This is the journal. It's the C is part of the closing here. I'm closing 2024. I'm a little bit behind. But you can tell that, there wasn't much happening, I guess, in 2024. But it's rolling them into the retained earnings. Obviously this would normally be very long and have all your P&L accounts. Once you post this, then you're good. If there's a problem later, you need to do audit adjustments or something, you can do that. You can come back and run that process again. It'll incrementally pick them up. You can make those changes. So you don't have to, it's not like you have to do those manually. There is a control that happens just as far as the system's concerned in our setup that shows us in the here we go, in the periods. Now you can tell in my system Okay, 23 is closed, 24 is closed. Like I told you, I was kind of behind. So I need to get, 25 and 26 done. But so that it's closed those out, right? And there's scenarios where if you need to do something, you can go back and redo it. But basically that's your hard close, so to speak, process you do. Don't do that by month. Of course, you just do that for the year. Okay. A few other things just maybe again, for accounting type controls, important usually for us for CPAs. So there's some approvals that you could be doing. There's a change log and there's some other controls and things we can talk about. So the this is more the, I would say the permission or security level. BC has native profiles. These actually show the payables, but we have this also for if you need to narrow this down, you can see there's an accounting manager, there's bookkeepers, there's different. So there's the profile on the left, which tells you more on the screen what I can see. It doesn't necessarily enforce the security. It was kind of like hide, show things that are appropriate to me. On the right is there's rules behind this for the different ones that are set that tell me what I can and can't do, meaning I can't go to this page, I can't do this process, I can't see this report. Those are important from a control point of view of get the right ones assigned to the right people. And so those are important to get set up. Let me go back. Sorry, I skipped a step. Oh, here we go. The change log is another one. You can set up and define a change log in the system, and it's often used like when we're talking in GL context here, you would typically want to have a change log on the GL accounts. Like who can't, like you may be letting certain people do it, but you still want to know it was done. So you could have a change log on account number description was changed or an account number was added. The system, if you turn that on, whatever you define you want to track, it'll track those for you. It'll give you the old new value, who did it, what was the time frame. Auditors may want to see this, right? So you don't turn it on for everything. You turn it on for what's usually for your master file or your setup in some aspects that you want to track. So you can keep track of those. And then workflows, some people want to do batch approval or journal approval. I can show you just on the screen. I don't have the workflow set up, but when we're on our journals, let me go back to a journal, there will be a button here. If it's turned on, there's an approval, right? So you can actually go through, I don't have it turned on, but you can go through and route these through. So those can happen. You can route through approval workflow, get the appropriate people to do that before you post things. This exists for several of the modules. All right, let me see if I skipped anything. I think you kind of talked about that together with the controls. It's more the permissions. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper. We've kind of been talking about some of this already on the entries, but I'm going to do a little bit more on the inquiry and reporting analysis, because obviously once we've got all that data, we want to work with it. So let's spend a little more time on that on the GL entries side. That's kind of our core view. Oops. Change that. I must have changed my filter. So the out of the box view, I wouldn't say this is the old view because people still use this, but there's a view like this that's not our pivot tables. It still has its place, and it's important sometimes to use it this way. It's still a quick way to filter things. You still have the open in Excel. I would say the edit in Excel doesn't really have a place. I don't know why some screens show it, but you really can't do anything with it. You can't change posted transactions here. So it's not like, don't worry that you can't go in and change your debits and credits and things on this. But this page here of the entries, you would go in, and if you wanted to, obviously you can do filtering. So if I want to see Department 100, I can set the filter to this value. I get Department 100, and I can say, okay, I want to call this Department 100. What I'm kind of showing you is kind of like the classic way of doing these things, right? So you've got that filtering, you can save the filters, have these fields. We really like to use the analysis, but I will say as far as performance is concerned and kind of really it's performance more than anything, but just to kind of speed it up, the process is to the extent that you can say filter, especially a lot of data, if you can filter your dates or filter kind of what you want to see, it might be a little faster in some cases to filter this page first, kind of set a view, and then go into your analysis. You can always do it from the analysis, but if you have a ton of data, this page might be a little slower. It kind of renders differently, and your grouping, your calculation, or your summarizations might be a little slower. So think about maybe first doing some of your filtering and some of your grouping before you get to this page, just for performance. Once they're set and you're good and you got your filters, you're pretty good. And you're going to need to still come in here and do some filtering. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but once you're on here, then you can see here, like we talked earlier, like I did a view of the vendors. I'm just going to click a new one. I don't have a ton of data. So this is all my data. It has the same columns of code of fields that I had on that first page. So that's another important thing, is like there's a way to kind of decide what columns you should see before you get here. What's neat is on this one, though, you can still go in and say, kind of like a pivot table. Let's say I don't really want to see the GL account name, it's gone, right? So this is just like when we're in Excel, hide and show things, right? So it's not changing the data, but it's doing that. And it's a little bit of like, you can drag and drop, you can organize this thing a little bit like a pivot table. And there's a little bit more, you can put this into a pivot mode. That's just the totals. I didn't do any really grouping on this one, but you can pivot, right? So it's a little bit of that. If I look at one of these other ones, this says by cost center. So let me click on, doesn't look like I actually changed it by cost center. What I'll do is I'll use this as example to go, let's do it by department, which I have it by department, but we'll do that again. So you can do a grouping. So I'm going to say group by department, and so I can just have all of them go into one place. All right. Well, that would group it appropriately, right? But the idea here is you go in, you do whatever makes sense as far as grouping and filtering your data. Each of these columns can be, you can do filtering, you can do grouping. You can get those set where everything's like you want it. And knowing that you're probably going to go out to Excel, right? That you can still use this to say, all right, let's right click, let's export this to Excel. It goes out to Excel. If you've done some grouping, you've done some filtering, it respects that, it drops it into Excel that way, right? And it still has, again, this kind of filtered view. You can also use this for drill down. So again, if I'm on one of these and I want to go out and look at the data, I can go out and I can drill back on these. So it's not just, going to Excel. You can also use this to kind of go back and look at your data also, if you want to do that. Let's see what else. There was, the other part of this, I don't use this a lot yet, but you can see there's a Copilot function down there at the bottom. So you can actually go in here, and if you didn't know fields, you can kind of say, I'm just going to put a posting date. Let's just say GL account amount. You can have Copilot generate a list for you. So I think now most of us are faster than Copilot on things like this, but it's kind of neat to kind of think of, okay, this is a good direction that things are going. And really, ideally, I'd like to be able to just tell Copilot to do this, and it just spits it out. But you can see it's getting to the point of, hey, let Copilot kind of build this for you and kind of fill these things in, give you some prompts. There's quite a bit of Copilot that's built in to BC. This is one example where it can do that and kind of start building this. If I like this, did some kind of grouping for me based on what I asked for, I can keep it. So this is one of the places that comes up. Copilot's got chat, it's got bank recon, it's got a lot of other places that I won't really get into today. But that's one of the places that it exists. Okay, but I would say use this a lot. It's fast, it's good analysis, and it gets it to Excel cleaner, I think, in my opinion, kind of grouped better than the native way to do it. Okay, Excel reports and templates. So there's a lot of canned reports. So let's just get over to, of course, there's tons of reports. I'll just get to the report list. I think I have that maybe on another screen somewhere, but a lot of traditional type reports, geo registers, trial balances, things that you can run. Everything's moving towards Excel and Power BI. So I'm going to just show a couple of examples of that. So when you go and run these, I'm going to run one out to Power BI, I'm sorry, to Excel. So let me go over, I think I've got it on my homepage here. I've got here's a trial balance. I'm going to show this, but I'm going to pull up the Excel result of this. So when you run these, depending on what you're going to send it to, you're going to send to option of Excel or wherever you want to go, or just preview them on the screen. You set your parameters and you run the reports. If you want to, you can get, there's a more advanced way to do these. Well, let me show you this kind of standard way first. So I've got one that went out to Excel just to save some time here. So this is pretty basic, right? This is just a traditional trial balance. I got a section here that's got, the beginning balance, and it rolls through. Like I ran this just for January, it rolls through the activity. So very, lots of reports like this that are old school, just account reconciliation, trial balances, that type of thing. The newer way to do these, as you start moving further into what can I do with Excel and with reports going out to Excel, is I think I have another one here. I may have turned that one off. Let me see here. Hold on a second. I'm going to find the other one that I did and pull it up. Here it is. Okay. This one, this is a new thing in BC, is Excel templates. There's different ways that they're used, but basically you can have a standard type report in BC, like a trial balance, and you can do things to that output. Like say, I'm going to run my trial balance to Excel, and then I want to make pivot tables, I want to make charts, I want to add other links, I want to do whatever I want to do. You can do that to your Excel. So like this one has pivot table. This was a chart that went out, a trial balance that went out to Excel, converted the pivot table. It's got some other analysis. I've seen one of these, a couple of these have slicers, different ways you want to do it. But really, it's whatever you want to do to your Excel file. You're good at Excel. Add your charts, add your pivots, add your links. Once that's all done, there's a method in BC to take those and bring those back into BC. So in other words, you make your changes, your changes to Excel, and you don't have to redo those every time, right? I make these changes, I save it. I'm not going to run through all the steps here, but basically there's a process you can go through in your report layouts. We can help you on this kind of thing, or you can do some research to find out, where these are. Kim Dalphone has a really good video on how to do these. I think she's still on the call, but she's got really good content on this. But there's ways you can go out and see. Let me show the type here. I'm going to filter this to Excel. Yeah, so there's a lot of different reports that have been kind of converted over. You can do your own, where you run the report, you get the data out, you do all the cool things you want to do in Excel, and you load it back in. That way, next time you run the report, it spits it out with all of your extra stuff. You don't have to do that every time. You don't have to run it and then copy paste it from one place to another. You can go in and run these reports, and you basically have report packages that have everything you can think of in Excel, and they're ready to go. So that's really powerful, because a lot of the complaints is when we run these reports, even like this one, let's say I run this preview, we're used to these old school reports, right? Not too exciting, but when you get these to Excel, now you can start to expand on that, but you don't want to have to do that work every time. You want to be able to run that, use the version that is set up for your templates. It's real powerful for financial reports. We're not going to do financial reporting today, but that's probably the best place to use those, or I think it's one of the best places, because then you can get into more of, I've got a reporting package, I've added all the analytics, dashboards, et cetera, to my financials, and I can include those in my reports when I run them. I don't have to do all this jockeying back and forth of all that data. So those are out there like that. Okay. Go through this one. Yeah, this is the report list that we were just talking about. Yeah, this was the trial balance, just making sure. Yeah, let's talk about Power BI a little bit. Now, in the GL, again, we're not really talking about financials, but I'll just stay on the screen for a moment, and then I'll pull it up on my screen. But obviously, there's a financial aspect of Power BI. Power BI, Microsoft has made Power BI apps for BC for different modules. And so it's got like this type of data where you can see this and you could drill down on these. This isn't really GL per se, right? This is under the hood, it might be GL, but this is more analysis. You can still use it though, if you want. There is a scenario where you could go in, I'm going to open this up. So this is that dashboard inside BC. I'm going to go and expand on this. Take a second to open it up. There is actually a tab over here that has, we've been talking about ledger entries, the GL entries. So depending on how you've set this up, I mean, it will work out of the box. Like you can set the filtering and things and say, I want to look at my GL data. I want to drill down on it. Depending on the setup, you can drill back into BC. But there is ready to go Power BI that is available for this that you can work through those modules. Okay. A lot of that. All right, let's see. Short quiz. Okay. So, Sam, have you pushed the quiz out yet? Oh, yeah, it looks like it's going. Thank you.
Yes,
So,
just
so I'm gonna
sent.
answer these. And if anyone's got any, we're kind of to the end here. If anybody's got any other questions, I can answer those too. Let me look at, I'm just going to answer the chat. Okay. As you're answering those, I'm going to go back to one thing that I went over really quick because we have a couple extra minutes. I want to go back to, I know we spent quite a bit of time on the journals, but there's something else I want to show to the journals. Yeah. Give this a second. Let me go to a different screen. All right. I want to go in just for a minute. Just we have a couple extra minutes of time here. One thing I didn't point out is kind of how the debits and credits work on doing journal entries. So I kind of just glossed over that, which is, I think, kind of important. So you'll see in our view right now, the way this one's laid out, it looks like they're all positive, right? Like, okay, well, where are the debits and credits and where are the entries? You know, this is 3 lines of entries right here. If I go and run this or preview this, I get 6 lines. It's like, okay, well, how is that? And you see there's some credits here. So this is an important thing of kind of how you use BC. There is this one line here at the top. It's a debit to this 60,000 account, and it's a credit over here. Only it's a credit because this is a positive amount. So positive means debit, negative means credit. So what I didn't point out earlier is the convenient way or the quick way is you can have like a 1 line here can be 2-line journal entry. So this is debit this account, credit this account because this amount is positive. You can still go through if you want and do these as, okay, let's say instead of doing that, I'm going to put the 26,700 here and I'm going to do the same company and I'm going to do the same thing here, right? And I can make this 25,000 and a minus, and I don't have to fill this other side in. So that is knowing that really you can still do the 2-line entry if you want to. And some people like to. They like to see it that way. They don't like, and maybe if they're copy pasting and things, it might make more sense. So just wanted to point that out. I didn't cover that earlier. That's a different way to do your entries. And then the other view, if you just really want to see the debits and credits, there is another view. I don't like this view because I don't have as much data on here, but there is a view with the debits and credits. So I went over to page. There was a show less columns and there's a show more. So there's a way to see debits and credits if you really want to. But otherwise, it's important to see this. And you'll notice because of what I did here, it's telling me I got an issue because I'm out of balance, right? Because I just created an entry. So I will go in and we'll add another one and then I'll preview that again.
Steve, I wanted to bring to your attention, there's another question.
Great.
Is there a best practices type document that you could set up correctly or go back to audit the setup to see if it's done properly?
There's content from Microsoft and content from Microsoft MVPs like Kim and others that we can get information on. There's also some tools out on the market that kind of do a health check of your system. I would say we could kind of pull something together for you. I don't have a quick to go one, but we have that kind of content. Microsoft would have some. There's in the Business Central community, there's groups that you could go in and you can get, if you're, want to be a part of the community, you can go out and see a lot of content on best practices. I don't think if off the top of my head, if I know of a document like that, I'm sure there is some out there, but we can pull that through. And Kim's typing it. Kim has a lot of information on it. Kim's on our call. She worked with us. She's Microsoft MVP for Business Central and very active in the community groups. So I know that type of information is available. Yeah,
Kim
she's
had
saying it's
shared
very
the
company specific. Yeah, I would say, we talked about some of those things like how you use the direct posting versus not on a GL account, or how you do some date. There's some core things that are going to be just universal. But in the GL is a little more narrow, right? There aren't as many options, but yeah, it does get into be like what's very specific to your companies, especially security, right? Generally, the thing to do is say maybe the how you do it is going to be very specific. The what you should do, really consider your permissions, your change log, consider those things, and then the how to implement those is a little more challenging on the best practices, but it will be at least a checklist of these are the things I need to consider. All right, well, I think we hit it all. Let's see here. Just as a little short commercial or info. Center does have YouTube, and Allie just posted it in the chat. So if you're interested in that, different topics, some are security, some are Business Central, ongoing. So let us know about, jump in there and take a look at that. We try to keep that current. We'll do other webinars like this one too. We haven't decided yet what the next one's going to be. We're going to try to get through the core modules. We did AP, this is GL. So we'll do the core stuff, and then we're going to have other scenarios where there might be something like, a special kind of, okay, here's a short one on a very special topic, but we're trying to get through the core modules like we're doing here, financial reporting and receivables and other modules that we'll get through next. So.
Great.
All right.
Thank you all for joining, and we'll be following with sending the certification for the CPE credit. And we appreciate everyone's time and happy to follow up if there are any additional questions. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.